Hi, this is Cliff Berg, and you're listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jay Hersko. Joined with me once again, I have a murder.
Did you just mispronounce your own name to start the podcast?
I forget what show I'm doing and I forget which personality I should have. It's either offensive or more offensive. This is the less offensive one. So we have a murderer's row of guests joining us from the Deep South. We have Mr. Mike Cadell.
Howdy, y'all.
Also in the South, we have Franz Alchemade from an undisclosed location.
There we go.
Otherwise known as XSplit.
Fresh off a flight and a trip to Disney, and he's going to be in an interesting mood, Mr. Jonathan Schneider.
Howdy.
We have coming at us from somewhere in Centralia, Mr. Stephen Kellogg.
Hello.
And then we have our token Texan, Mr. Chris Merman.
Jay, are you okay? Because your intro for all of us is terrible.
Said my name wrong again.
Whatever. If you can spell mine,
we
I'll
love
say
you,
yours.
Jay. This is a safe place.
Jay.
Okay?
This is going to be a fucking terrible episode. All right, so the topic of tonight's episode is no Scrum Master, no Flow Master, no problem. So the genesis of this conversation came about a question I threw out into the Discord, and all these lucky, wonderful gentlemen decided to hop in. And the question was, can you be successful in Agile, in an Agile operating environment, or even in a transformation? If you're doing Scrum and you don't have Scrum Masters, if you're doing Kanban and you don't have Flow Masters. So let's just get gut reactions out of the way. Don't overthink it. And then we'll get into the details. Mike Cadell, can you be successful?
Yes, but it's very difficult.
Kellogg, yes or no?
It depends. Favorite line.
God. Here we go.
You can
It
be.
took all,
Yes.
48 seconds to get that out of somebody.
I
Friends.
had to throw it out there.
I think you can, but you need a team that specializes in communicating with one another.
John.
The role has to exist. No.
Merman.
Black and white. There is no gray area in life. There is right and wrong to all. Get in line. So says Sauron Schneider.
You didn't answer the question, Merman.
Yeah, at least I answered questions.
Have you met listen, that's not, you have your shtick, I have mine. Have y'all met some Scrum Masters out there? Like, you're telling me by default they make it better? No, they're not
Hey,
necessary.
Merm, do you
Just
mind defining us what a Scrum Master is for the crowd?
okay,
God.
do you want what the Scrum Guide says it is, or do you want what happens in real life?
I want the MERM definition.
All right, so
Whatever Merm says he wants to define a Scrum Master as.
yeah, but hold on. We're gonna let Merman play Encyclopedia Britannica in a second. But so far we have Cadell says yes. Kellogg had it depends. Franz says yes. John said no. I say no. Merman, you said yes or no?
Yes, sir. Si,
Okay, so
senor.
you said yes.
You do not need one.
Okay, so John and I are voted here. So now
Dated,
Merman,
yeah.
Both.
outdated, yeah.
Freudian
Merman,
slip, Franzian slip.
Explain Franzian slip. Explain what a Scrum Master is. So let's go back to John's question.
I think that the idea is someone that's in a full-time position that keeps the team free to work on just things internal to things they've already planned and quote unquote, I hate this word, but committed to. So the Scrum Master is intended to be the go-between, someone that can interface, and there's all sorts of terrible phrases like throats and choking that I don't like, but get used all the time. They're supposed to be that guardian, right? Like, hey, y'all just work. I'll take care of these questions that you all have. The problem is that that's not what the job is most of the time for Scrum Masters, and it's time we start being honest about it.
So your answer is yes, it can work, but the problem is we typically don't have the Scrum Master.
I don't know.
The Scrum Master should be doing.
There's no guarantee that even if we do have a good definition that it can work. Mike, what do you think?
I agree with the statement that even if we have a good definition or a not so good definition, having a person in the role of a Scrum Master is no guarantee that the team will perform well. what I was raising my little finger about was I'd like to add something to Chris's definition, and that is, in addition to the, help the team focus, one of the vital aspects of the Scrum Master role is helping the team figure out how to fight with each other and how to kiss and make up and deal with conflict within the team and become better at working together.
So
kind of
you're
along Franz's line.
Yeah, you're right, Mike, that they're supposed to be a guardian of the quote unquote process. The problem is that,
Yeah.
I mean, depending on the scenario and the organization you're set up in,
Mhm.
even if they are properly trained and motivated and skilled, the organization also,
shouldn't.
like most of the time, doesn't allow them to
Yep.
do that, to do the role, right, to do the work, to protect the team, to help
Yeah.
them guard the process, right? But most of the time,
Yeah.
like Scrum Masters they're not in charge of their processes. They have dev managers somehow to like keep happy that they somehow set things up. And a lot of times they're also I know this isn't part of this podcast, but Scrum Masters also play PO a ton of the time, and they're supposed to do all that and guard the process. Guess what's going to fall aside? The process. Like they've got other
Yeah.
crap to fix.
I think one of the other problems you run into is, especially with does a Scrum Master help, is even if you have the clear definitions, how many times have we all seen a Scrum Master that's assigned to 7 teams? And the only thing that they're doing is scrum meeting, and then
Or
writing
2
notes.
teams of 30.
Yeah, and they're just sending notes off all day. Like in those situations, you're not getting anything from a Scrum Master. Like
You don't
There
have a
are-
Scrum Master in those
No, you
situations.
don't.
You have a secretary.
you have somebody who reads the board and then asks you where your ticket is and have you put in your comment, and that's it. That's what you have. You're not.
Let me ask to tag off of what Mike was saying. Let me ask, Stephen, what do you think is like, if a Scrum Master says, man, I'm just an admin on this team, should they feel shame? Like, should they, do you, and I'm not saying this pejoratively, and I'm not trying to like provoke you into like a weird joke answer. Like, should they feel like it, if many Scrum Masters that I know, they finish meetings and they feel like an admin sometimes because they're just dictating things. The business owner is there giving things, and they're the ones that have to create the JIRA cards. They try to keep up with like what they talked about in the last retro, but so much has happened since then. If they even get to talk about the retro or even have one, like, so if they feel like an admin, like, should they feel badly about themselves in this role?
I don't think they should feel shame, but I think it's time to self-reflect and figure out, is this what they want to be doing? Probably not. But then how do they go about changing that so that they can be a better Scrum Master and actually be more fulfilled in the job?
I feel like you should just be disappointed in that point. Not necessarily.
Well, but see,
ashamed,
here's the
but-
thing. Most of those things you don't know when you're interviewing. Sometimes you don't even know until you've been in the org like 6 months. Even the most astute ones, even if they do sniff up those things way in advance, like sometimes they get moved to another team because their org went through like their 3rd reorg in 16 months, right? And trust me, we've all been there. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say, like, so I'm starting from a point of like, well, what if they don't do any of these things? Like, is the Scrum Master even needed? Well, let's talk about real world. Like, John, real world, do you really see by and large, yes, there are Scrum Masters that are the exception, but would you say by and large, a lot of Scrum Masters aren't able to do the role as they're taught it is in training class?
I would argue that most team members that I've actually helped coach or be a Scrum Master to have been better people to play the role of a Scrum Master than most Scrum Masters out there. They get it. They empathize with teams better. They can usually adjust and learn better than other Scrum Masters and coaches out there. So to answer your question, yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of people would struggle and don't serve the role properly. And I would argue that there are a lot of team members that probably could do the role better. But I think, Mike, we were talking about this. They don't want to do the role because it requires a weird set of unique skills and talent and mindset to do it effectively at a
interesting.
full-time length that they just never want to do the role, which then gets into the weird reason why I said no, because I wasn't viewing it as a role that has to be a full-time role. It has to exist. That's my take on it. So if
See,
you look at what the role fulfills, that's how I viewed it. But Jay, what were your thoughts on it?
I think I would argue with the statement that it needs to be a full-time role. So I'm not going to lean on the Kellogg answer if it depends, but I think he's right. I think when teams have reached that nirvana level of maturity, you really don't need a scrum master because they're literally just grabbing tickets, right? But if you believe that happens more than 5% of the time, you will
Let me pick
believe
on
when
you
I
for a
can
sec.
see my
I
feet when I
disagree with
stand
that,
straight
Jay.
up.
So, Franz,
Wait, I want
and
you to pick on Jay.
But like, imagine you actually had like a very high performing, mature, whatever we want to call it. I don't want to use the word mature too much because that's going to stir up a whole nother thing. But like, let's say a very, team that you observe would say is high agility would not need somebody in this role performing it all the time. I would still argue that there are people out there that are very talented, can ask the right questions or poke in the right subject matter expertise area, be it product transformation or technical, that is still going to push that team into outside their boundaries. So it's more around, does the company want to continue to invest to optimize this high performing team or not? Because to say that this team can't improve more, I would always challenge that. It's a matter of, do you want to invest to bring in the talent to do it?
The problem I think you're going to run into when you talk about it, how they're high performing, they're just picking up tickets and going. It's very easy for a team when they get to that particular point to stop their introspection. And so if you have a team that does very, very well and they're producing very well, they may go, okay, we are at the top of the mountain. There is no way our process can be improved. And the second a team starts thinking that, you will start rotting on the vine because something is going to come along, and we all know this. It is way easier to have bad habits get added because you start getting lazy than it is to add a new good habit. And so the team may go, you know what? We stopped doing this one particular thing because it took too long and we know we need it. We don't need this particular test. And when you don't have that constant introspection, that can often come from a guided, like a guided retro that you would not necessarily have in those teams. You're going to start having problems.
But so before you say that, Merman, what Franz is saying is basically entropy sets in, and if left unchecked, that's just going to eat the team. Okay.
Yeah.
So all right. So let me pose another scenario that's in it's basically a different type of org that has the same problems, right? So they don't look at the staleness of a team, right? And they don't understand. They don't have a good. There's not a good pulse, like a pulse check of like, really, how are you doing? Like a simple, simple NPS or 1 to 10 type score of how are you feeling about yourself and the team this week, kind of a thing. Like if they don't have that, then yes, it's easy to let things like stiffen. It's almost like food that sits out. It's like the charcuterie board that sits out like just a bit too long, and you're like, oh,
wait a minute, you really pronounced that word correctly? Really?
Charcuterie, baby.
Charcuterie board.
I hope this goes on our YouTube channel. This is what I think of you. A blaze. And yes, podcast audience, you're going to need to go find the YouTube.
I will actually do the solid and put this video
here is what I think of Jay and his trolling questions.
So anyway, enough of your charcuterie board. Keep going.
There's another way that orgs do it. I just mentioned the orgs that are addicted to their reorgs. Do you know one of the things that they see as a benefit, and I know this because they said them with words in a language that I speak, is our teams can't get stale. We keep moving them around. Maybe we'll keep a team stable, but we'll with all the reorgs, we'll bring in a new agile lead or scrum master or project manager or whatever you want to call that role. And there's way more names than we thought of than that, right? So because of all the reorg, there's a constant state of motion. Our teams can't get stale because we don't let our entire org sit still for more than 30 seconds to get comfy in their seat. I know I'm being sarcastic and I know I'm saying things that are ridiculous to a group like us, but to folks that do like org design and HR and stuff, they're like, that's genius. Why didn't we think of this sooner? And I go, well,
followed by, I heard it on Agile Uprising.
Sure. Sure. We're clearly we're an expert in non-sarcastic advice about what I would argue that at least three out of 4 pieces of advice I've given have been sarcastic, most of them to John. So John, John, these are both extremes of really bad behavior. I guess I don't know, Jay, where a next logical step is to go, but the next step, I mean, in my mind, it's like, well, we could talk about why orgs do that, but orgs are just like companies are stupid, and their lead, like any group of people together is stupid, even though individually they're smart. So when they make decision together, like things go wrong. Like why is it such a pain to just go, hey, this team, go leave them alone and just let them decide when they want to meet and do stuff? Like why can't companies just let teams do that?
We threw out a scenario though that said, oh, there's no scrum master, so they go stale. But that was not with the discussion that, hey, is it possible for the team to actually self-impose the scrum master?
Well, that
role?
means, can a tech lead be scrum master? I think what John's saying is that, I think if I'm taking John at his word, and I've learned over the years that there is about this much nuance to what Schneider says, and so I'm learning to see it. What he's saying is that the work of the scrum master needs to get done. It doesn't have to be someone called the scrum master. It could be a tech lead or a QA lead, or just, hey, the janitor walking by cleaning out. Like, as someone's like, hey, how do we know we're getting better? Like, that's the role being done. So I've not found a team that mature, but I hear they exist. So
So you bring up an interesting point though, right? You said that the work that a scrum master typically does still needs to get done, right? A lot of it is metrics, a lot of it is maintenance. There is some housekeeping, there is some secretarial stuff. Let's be honest here. There's secretarial aspects into what all of us do, except for Franz, because he actually, writes code and works for a living. But I do think, what happens if you don't have that person who is supposed to do that? Right, who is specifically deemed, who's knighted and said, you are going to be the scrum master. My experience has been, it ends up being a rotational thing on the team, right? And you end up with a bunch of engineers or a bunch of team members, developers, coders, UX guys, whatever, passing the baton back and forth. Oh, who's going to be scrum master this sprint? Oh, John's going to do it, right? Oh, well, John can't do it because he's too busy with this stuff, so we'll have Mike do it. Okay, not for nothing. No offense to Mike, senior Kafka developer. There you go, Franz. No offense to Mike, but that's not his skill set. That's not his wheelhouse. That's not what he went to. It's not what he's tried to learn. And I'm sure he'll the good old college try, and not wanting to disappoint people, he'll do the best he can. But I kind of don't think that's fair.
What happens when they rotate a role like that is, the analogy I try to explain it to people is, it's no different than saying, hey, we need to do rotation of people supporting production this sprint. So you and you, we're going to choose you. That mindset that they have when they do that is, I hope it's the bare frickin' minimum, and I'm going to focus on the sprint goal as much as possible because I don't want to touch prod. That's how they view when they rotate usually a scrum master role on the team. I'm going to do the bare minimum because it's a role that I just need to get in and get out, and hopefully it rotates to the next person. Nobody really treats it like as their
potato.
Yeah,
you're treating running a retrospective as taking pager duty for the night.
Right, but yeah, basically,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
That
actually
is
really,
a
that's
real-
a perfect analogy.
It's a terrible metaphor, but
that hits
it's
below
right.
the belt, but it's very true.
But like to extend a little bit on what you're talking about, Jay, like it's definitely interesting when you start seeing the team start to do the role, because this is just my experience, but we kind of push this and say, hey, don't you have a team working agreement where you guys understand and share and understand how this role is performed? And yeah, my team changes every 6 months or 3 months anyways. It's always one person moving to another team or just a new employee, and we always have to update it and it gets changed. And then they're like, honestly, now it's just admin overhead. It's annoying. And honestly, after a while, it goes back to what Franz said earlier. It just becomes annoying to manage a process. We can just talk it out and figure it out on the fly. And then after a while, when they start doing things on the fly, things get a little more loosey goosey, and then then the staleness starts setting in. And that's kind of that's just my observations that I've seen on most teams.
I do want to throw this back to Franz again, because he does real work. He writes code. Franz, have you been on teams that didn't have a scrum master, and what was that experience like, if so?
So I've been on one team that was highly successful without any scrum masters, but the reason we were able to not have scrum masters is every single one of us had experience doing scrum. And so we didn't necessarily need a scrum master, because when it came down to the passing the baton of, oh, it's Franz's week, Franz had experience and had his Scrum Master cert. Everybody else had their Scrum Master cert. So we were able to operate in those roles competently. Now, I will say, though, while we did...
Franz, be serious. How many days did you get stuck with the Scrum Master baton? And second part, how many days of the week did you abuse that power just to show them who's boss?
Be honest.
Well,
so that's the fun thing. That was when Franz was just a wee Franzi, and he didn't get to have the big kid pants on to wield the fist of power quite as much as he should have been able to. So not too much abuse of the power there, but the big thing I got out of it was you have to be able to have those communications. We were a team that was high functioning because when the day was going on, we were in a very active Slack and we were talking constantly. So there wasn't necessarily the huge need to go, okay, what did you work on with this? What did you work on with this? Because by the end of the day, you knew what everybody was working on because you had been assisting them with stuff.
Have you in your mind ever ended a retrospective with a snap of your fingers and the words, "I am inevitable"?
Not yet. I will say.
No. Be honest.
I am
in your mind.
In my mind? Oh, every time.
In your mind. Okay.
Oh, I've said I am inevitable quite a lot. That is one of my favorite lines. Because people are like, oh, Franz is here. It's like, you're goddamn right I am.
So,
wait, did you
so
start the
happy right now.
podcast off with the yes or a no?
I said no. I
Right,
don't
but
think
what
we
did you
use
just
Scrum Master.
describe?
I described a situation where there was no, going off the MERM definition that was given earlier, where it is a full-time person that is constantly on the team and functions as a Scrum Master to remove impediments. We did not have a Scrum Master. We had a bunch of people who had Scrum Master skills that removed the need for a traditional Scrum Master.
We didn't have a Unabomber on our team, but we did have many people with a few pieces of Unabomber skills.
We all knew how to make epoxy out of deer hooves.
Yeah,
like,
Okay, let's be honest. Okay,
that movie comes out this weekend. Charlton Copley plays Ted Kaczynski. I can't wait because he's going to choose scenery. I have a question for Mike.
He's in your
Goodell.
family. He's a member of your family.
Yeah, if we came from South Africa. I have a question for Mike. So I want to pivot the conversation a little bit to when it comes to the idea of trying to coach teams, right? Mike, have you ever had to or been part of coaching a team that didn't have a Scrum Master or Kanban Flow Master, a Kanban team without a Flow Master? Mm-hmm. And what was your experience? Do you think it would have been, was it successful? Do you think it would have been more successful if there was a person there? What's your gut tell you?
My gut tells me that it was one time, a very unique set of circumstances. Unlike the situation Franz mentioned, this team had been together for a while, and much like what Franz mentioned, they knew each other. They could finish each other's sentences constructively. They had their stuff together. They knew what to do, and they held each other accountable. So it was really easy because this was a group of just super dudes who knew what they were doing. They knew their domain, and the ability to hold each other accountable and call BS on each other was very unique. And it was easy to coach because all I had to do was just ask them a few questions and they go, oh, yeah, you're right. All right, off we go. But that's almost a unicorn. That's a needle in a haystack kind of thing.
Right.
The underlying the foundational thing that made that team so unique was that they'd been together. They didn't have people coming and going all the time. So they learned how to fight with each other and how to make up, and they learned how to communicate. And that, I think at the outset, Franz said to not have somebody in this role, the team members need to be highly skilled at communicating. And regardless of what anybody might argue otherwise, I'll argue that the most important aspect of a Scrum Master is instigating the communication and disagreement and eventual commitment amongst the team members. If you can teach them how to fight and make up, then
I get
your problems go away.
that's a genius thing that you're saying, Mike, just because like, regardless of whether you, quote unquote, protect the process or even, or protect the team, like so some of these things that are other main qualities that you would consider in a scrum master, what you're saying is like, I'm just refereeing what they're doing, making sure that everybody's like shaking their head the same direction, even if it's no, like we kind of need someone doing that. It sort of makes sense that if that's really so important, is that like, that's not something you can trade off. You're like, gosh, I get a break from having to like give a shit about what happens in team interactions like this sprint. Like it sort of begs the question of like, then why do we care about it if it's something we have to trade off and on sometime? Like, I'm not disagreeing with it. It's just something that's worth discussing, right?
Yep. So in the one instance that I encountered, it wasn't something that traded off because the team as a whole was very well formed and they held each other accountable to each other. So if Chris started slacking, then Steve would kind of give him a polite nudge, and they had enough history and enough respect for each other that they would respond to that nudge. And they joked around kind of, and they fight with each other and they love each other like brothers, like you and Jay do. But
Mike, can I ask you a question on your scenario? Did the team that was really mature, that was together for a while, did they ask for a coach?
They asked for somebody to facilitate interactions and things when they felt like they needed it. They didn't say I want a coach.
I like root canals. Did they say I prefer
So
to get a colonoscopy without anesthetic?
The person they worked for was like having a root canal, but
because they didn't ask for a coach necessarily. They just said, hey, we have a distinct problem where we need somebody to just help us. Is that fair to say?
The earliest discussions of the Scrum Master involving the words coaching the Scrum process, right? Like the word coach was stated in the definition of a Scrum Master from way back. It was one of those like teaching slide bulletins kind of a thing. Like, so and we wonder why we struggle with the word coaching and agile coaching today. It's because the word was just thrown around willy-nilly, like, hey, you get a free coach, you get a coach, you get a coach too.
Yeah. So here's my concern with trying to coach teams, right, that don't have scrum masters, right? No organization has as many coaches as they should have, right? No organization, because we're expensive, right? So what do? They peanut butter them. You get a train and you get a train and you get a train and everybody gets a train. And that's between 3 and 5 teams you got to work with. So if you're working between 3 and 5 teams with no scrum masters, right, that means you're interacting with, say, 30 to 50 people, just argument's sake, right? Usually, if those 3 to 5 teams have a scrum master, you're interacting with those 30 to 50, but you're also concentrating the conversation around the scrum master. Say, hey, you tell me.
How dare you invoke SAFe right now? We were having a polite discussion.
Well, you know what? I will give credit where credit is due. It's the easiest way to refer to a team of.
I'm just saying, like we were fighting about just one team, and now we're going to start fighting about multiple teams.
Here's my thing, right? I have seen coaches get dropped into, oh, you're going to help these teams get better, and these teams have no scrum masters. They have a product owner that comes from technology, and this poor coach is trying to peanut butter themselves over all these teams to get the simple things to stick.
Are we talking about a coach that got an SPC and has never been a scrum master before? I'm asking for a friend. I'm just asking.
No. We're talking about a coach who actually knows.
Do you know how many coaches have never been a scrum master that are in our industry now?
Way more than we should probably admit.
Yeah. So let's be careful about throwing coach out there, because I know that Mike's had his hand up like a patient young man for a while, but we talk about coaching as if like everybody that's a coach knows what they're doing, when most people have never even run their own retro and they're teaching other people how to be a freaking scrum master. Mike, please save me.
Yes.
So just a plus 100 to that, Chris. Have you seen what's in job descriptions for agile coaches recently? It'll make your head hurt. But
not the word scrum master.
Back to Jay's point, the idea of parachuting or peanut buttering a quote coach in to help the team and expect that that's sustainable, I think is a non sequitur. What I've learned the hard way over the last 5, 7, whatever years, and has become kind of the model that I am advocating in my practice, is that as a coach, an external coach, the way we can create sustainable change is to work with scrum masters or somebody, going back to that article from the other day, I don't care who you are, what your title is, somebody that can be a day-to-day coach with the team and help them learn how to fight and make up. And what I can do is I can teach people who are going to be embedded with the team how to be a local coach.
Right, right.
John
when
and
that
Jay,
person isn't
John and
there-
Jay, how dare you? Like Mike was talking, and y'all are
Yeah.
just being
When-
jackasses. Like
yeah.
No, I'm
John's
agreeing
throwing
with
out.
him. No, I'm agreeing with him because
To Jay's
Oh, I
Mike's
thought
the
right.
you
question
were-
Jay's about to ask me, what do you do when that person isn't there? You're screwed.
Yeah, and that's why I'm gesticulating wildly, because we agree with Mike. I mean, that makes it that much harder.
They
right?
also might be screwed if they're there too. Like again,
Possibly,
we act
yeah.
like
true.
we
true.
act as if like
Yeah.
a scrum master physically being present just makes everything better. When we know what kind of like
Yeah.
the number of scrum
Merm.
masters I know, I'm like,
This
sorry,
goes
go
Think
ahead.
of it
back to,
as think of it
how
as
many-
necessary
how-
but not sufficient.
how many orgs would actually know talent if they saw it in a scrum master?
Less than 1%.
There's your that, and that's the answer why.
But
I mean, that's-
again, all right, let me ask you a question. You asked me for a real world definition of what a scrum master is.
Mhm.
So I don't know that I said anything particularly controversial, and not that I wasn't trying to be thought provoking. I wasn't trying to be safe. I was trying to go middle of the road of like, let's actually try to answer this for once, which is not what I normally do on this podcast. So the question I have for you is, the definition that I gave, how close do you think other orgs would be to agreeing with my definition? I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm just saying how many would agree.
I think they agree, which is part of the problem.
Do they? No, I'm okay, Steven. Like what percentage
Yeah,
do you think
Stephen,
do you think a lot of orgs agree with my definition? The
I think
answer
they
is
would-
no, is what he's
yeah, I
trying
was
to
gonna
say. No, that's the answer he's
I
trying to
think
say.
the answer is no, and I think it's
Yeah.
because they would look at a job description that has 15,000 words in it for
Yeah.
all kind of stuff and be like, what?
I just spent the last however many months, many months, like actively job searching, like actively.
Did you post to that one where it said the more certs, the better? Did you post to that job? I want to find somebody who interviewed there to see
I don't.
what the conversation was like.
I
Yeah,
don't
but-
remember seeing that,
No,
but
but-
see, here's the thing. Hold on. Here's where I was going with this is that I've seen so many job descriptions over the last, so many, and they could be, I would say that the basic team level agile coach, right? Your $75 an hour, $70 an hour, 65 an hour, right? Person, right? Or your 150 like an hour principal consultant, 250 an hour principal consultant, right? Even up to director and sometimes VP level. If you're a bank, they all had the same job description. They all use the same words. They all describe the same things. Like it didn't matter whether they would just say work with leadership or work as leadership. Like it's the same thing. Like my first question that I would have to recruiters is, what level of work would you do this if it were something that you were applying in another organization? They're like, oh, well, this is probably like a senior level at best, or a lead, or a principal, or, maybe a director if it's like a really important person kind of a thing. And, and I'm not saying that titles matter, because we know that they don't. But what I'm trying to say is that the way that the clarity of the job description, the lack thereof that we're seeing today, it's gotten worse. I don't know if y'all agree, but it's gotten worse. And that in lies the point of we understand less of what a scrum master does, not more, because we describe coaches, we describe directors of transformation, we describe all levels of people that are here to make the soft and fuzzy process thingy worky, right? Like you can take as simple of a view of this as possible. We're worse at describing them and which is why finding the people is even harder, because we don't even know how to describe it. That's a lot of words, and I understand that I said too many of them. I apologize.
Yeah, and there's also this movement. I'm curious, Mike, your take on this, because I think you've spoken, or at least it's been a while, but the whole movement of people kind of basically say, well, a scrum master and an agile coach, there is no difference. They do the role. They both do those jobs. I've heard that a lot in blog posts, and it only kind of reaffirms what Merm just said. Basically, it's like it's so confusing that now we're just squashing the two together and just saying, well, there's no difference really, and that only just confuses things even more.
Not to invoke Safe's letters again, but just add RTE and STE to it. Like it's just the same thing.
And Kanban does use Flowmaster, don't they? No, isn't there a certification for Flowmaster?
Scrum Master is not specifically called out in a Kanban framework, but there's sort of steward like behaviors that it does call out. I'm not.
Yeah, you know what?
I just offend any of our pro Kanban friends out there.
I just did KMP, and I don't think they mentioned it once. Like the idea of a named role.
The product role is mentioned, right? Where you get your business needs from in Kanban, but you do not.
I've heard of flow managers, but it's a rare role. So, okay.
There's another 20 titles for the work that a Scrum Master does that, it's frankly whatever is going to recruit the people that you want. So if you get a bunch of recruits that are like Scrum Master title's stupid, I don't like it. Well, then they come up with Agile Lead or Process Champion or pick any number of things, right? Some organizations just say, screw it. You're a senior level employee or a lead level or whatever. Like, who cares? Titles are stupid.
So Stephen, you've dealt a lot with the startups and stuff. So I'm curious from your perspective, when these people literally just the last thing they think in their budget is hiring somebody to kind of be this type of role, how do they handle this type of function, like way of thinking? Because clearly they have background experience and have Agile usually in some way or fashion. But even if they don't, what do they do? Do they just absorb it and wing it, or is that...
do it for
you? Tell us about your middle out algorithm, like while you're doing this.
They do it poorly. Mostly it's a group of, most of the startups I work with are a group of younger folks who are heads down developing a product that they think is going to be a miracle app. And some of them are some good ones. No, they don't actually.
They just go, hey, how do I get stuff done?
How do I get this out? Yeah.
Isn't that what kind of...
And that's usually where I'm like, okay, guys, so how are you prioritizing things? What? We're not. This is the next thing we have to work on.
So Merm, I mean, keep me honest here, but Franz, I'd love for you to chime in too. And Jay, like, don't a lot of leadership virtue like to be more startup like and have this mindset? I mean, so many leaders are now using this phrase.
But that's the reason they use that.
You say that like people just go, the startup mentality.
Everybody wants to be a startup. Nobody wants to be a startup.
I know exactly how to do it. I would say that I would argue that 80% of the professional workforce today does not know how to operate in a startup mentality and also doesn't have the ability to operate in that. Okay, more than 80, 90, 95. It's not something it's like we go, you just have to find the MVP. Oh, because it's that simple to define. Why didn't I think of 3 letters sooner to describe something that I don't know how to describe? And we're talking about a Scrum Master?
The reason that they push for the startup mentality, and I worked at a place that had been in business for like 15 years, and it's, we're a startup mentality. I'm like, no, we're not. What the owner wanted was everybody to put in 60, 70, 80 hours a week and just grind themselves to powder so he could replace them. That's what his mind said for startup.
I was literally hired to be a Scrum Master at a startup for a couple of teams that really needed some help. Do you know what my title was? Product management, not Scrum Master, product management. So what I'm trying to say is like startups don't go, oh my God, we need a scrum master. No, they go, well, I need some talent to help keep this team in line. What title do I have to give them to get them to get in line? That's way sexier than a scrum master.
Well,
So
that's the same thing as the startup saying, oh, I need a CTO, but you need to code 80-90% of the time.
I don't like your tone.
I'm gonna kneecap this conversation because there was an article that we shared a week ago that I think would make a discussion in its own. And there was that article about the idea of management and leadership in Silicon Valley and how they don't have managers, right? There was a real interesting article talking about that. So we'll come back to that one, but I want to pivot this conversation onto something more positive in the sense of as Franz laughs.
Why am I here?
and shout out to Claudia because she asked this question. If you find yourself coaching, engaged in an organization where they don't have scrum masters and yet they're trying to mature and they're trying to deliver and they're trying to do the agile dance as best they can, what tips and tricks would you give people to help them be successful to the best of their ability, considering the constraints of the environment they're working in?
A good job description to hire a scrum master.
Oh, that's a terrible way to start.
John?
Circle back to me.
Oh, don't do that, John. Now,
I need time to make sure that my answer soaks in the rays of the sun.
I won't call on Mike because Mike is thinking. So I'll throw something. I'll throw something out there.
Yeah.
He's got that look of consternation. So if I'm a coach and you're going to drop me into an org that has no scrum masters, how do I get successful? I think the best way to success is, first of all, walk quietly, right? Carry a big stick, but walk quietly, which is funny coming out of my mouth. And you really need to understand how the pieces are playing in the current sandbox and how they fit together. And then from there, my suggestion would be start having those honest and open conversations with the teams to say, hey, I know you don't have a scrum master. You're kind of doing the best you can, but here's some of the things that I think might be worth considering. Right. And then maybe you step in and guide them, but that's the only way I could see you even being remotely accomplishing something that even remotely resembles success.
Merm's answer: don't take the job.
Yeah.
So I
No,
got an
that's not
answer,
it
but
either.
I'll let
Okay.
Mern. I'll let Mern go first if he's ready.
I know. So here, so I'm not laughing at your answer, Jay. What I'm laughing at is the fact that, like, you're trying to fill a gap. And I think the struggle that we have as orgs that have this scenario where we're talking about, it doesn't matter how close you lead that horse to water, for lack of a better way to put it, to quote my brethren in this stupid state, is they're not going to drink the water no matter how close you get them to it, right? So trying to fill a gap that they don't even see as a gap is a real struggle. My first reaction, if I'm the coach or the transformation, whatever that's in charge, I just show up and go, fine. But what I'm going to do is you're going to let me have one or two teams that I get to run my way. And we're going to measure everybody equally. We're just going to measure everybody. And we pick this is one of our favorite topics here at AU, which is metrics and how stupid they are and how vanity filled they are. But if you get the right things to show the right success of a team, right? Whether it's production defects avoided, or whether it's flow and lead time, whether it's like whatever, even pick something stupid like velocity, doesn't matter. You just take away their excuse of saying, we're fine, we're mature enough on our own. Really? Because the team that I got to run my way and did my thing, and we measured everything equally, turns out over a whole PI, if we're using that framework, I took 5 sprints, we're kicking your ass. Now
So
what's
you're
your
saying,
next
so
excuse?
your rationale is prove arithmetically what you know anecdotally. that
Take
you
away
will be
their
more
excuse.
successful. Okay.
Take
Okay.
away their excuse. Like every leader has an excuse as to why they don't want to do what you're suggesting. Take away their excuse, and then you can get going.
Franz.
I don't think. Going off of what everyone's kind of said, one of the general things. I mean, we have Merm talking about the just removing the excuses. You have Jay.
By them, he says me.
Yeah.
Let's say that
We-
I'm
we-
right.
We have Jay talking about being quiet. I think
Not
in
as
my
right.
experience, I
Mhm.
don't think you can be successful without some sort of mandate from somebody pretty high up in a company. I have seen enough agile transformations, and I know we all have, where if you're somebody who gets put into a company with no real support, you're just someone who takes the job to come in and do your Scrum Master thing. If you do not have some serious muscle behind you, you will always fail. Because you can come up and you can have 12 managers and you can get 11 of them on board. You can come in and say, these are some small process changes. We've introduced them into these little test teams and we've seen a whole bunch of positive improvements. And that fifth dentist is going to come in and go, no, I know that's not going to work. My team's never going to change. And it will always stymie your ability to be productive in that. And I don't think those situations would work.
Okay, Mike.
So, kind of taking a slightly different angle to Chris's approach, my thoughts are to observe, kind of be quiet, observe, look for evidence to suggest that maybe the teams are not being as successful as they could, and offer alternatives to help them be more successful, and kind of build the case by observing actual facts as opposed to having a theoretical or religious argument about you need this, you don't need that. And the other point I'll add to that is check back with me in about 6 months, because my current client just did a reorg, and there's a strong likelihood I'll be working with a couple arcs that have RTEs but no Scrum Master, so it's going to be very.
You notice how his language got a lot shorter and a lot more space in between
Professional.
words.
It's kinda like,
so what
so I'm
happened?
gonna be working in
What
a place
happened
where
was
tomorrow-
I was
tomorrow.
maybe thinking that we could potentially discuss this idea hereforth, hence two. Like, yeah, we love you, Mike. This is a safe place. It's about
It's
to
a
get
what?
really It's about to get.
Don't use that
yeah, it's-
4-letter word.
It's about to get painful, is what we're trying to say. This is a safe
I
place.
would-
It's about to get painful.
So I would also recommend, if you were going into that situation, to go back and listen to the AU podcast on what do I do when I inherit new teams.
Okay, John.
Attaboy, way to promote previous stuff we've published. Attaboy.
Thank you. I'll take my 2 story.
I'm kind of going through this now, but basically it's a combination of Jay and Franz, actually a little bit of what you were saying, and Mike. The approach that we're
I
doing
hate
right
you.
now is figure out where the impact can actually provide value, and is based off your seniority position or what you're actually paid to do there. It's elevated. So with a lot of the people that were either former Scrum Masters that are now coaches, impacting the team level is not going to make a difference if you're not also impacting the people that are people leaders of those teams. Focus your efforts there. That's more impact, and it scales up from there. So there's going to have to be someone in that transformation space or org that is going to have to make an impact too, like Franz said, somebody that is mandating this, that's very high up, that's influential. And if you don't have that, you have to continuously work with them, negotiate, and figure out where they're coming from and what they want, and chip away at that, and just kind of meet them. And you're not going to push an agenda of what you want to transform. You have to meet someone in the middle or meet them where they are and figure out what exactly are we trying to improve and do. And honestly, the outcome might not be what you like. And that's a decision you have to make as a person if you want to continue to engage the transformation or not.
Mike literally started his opinion by saying, I agree with Merm. And then you also just quoted
gonna
something that
create
I
that as
said,
an
and
audio
then you
drop.
didn't, and then you didn't.
Well, I
You
agree with
didn't
Merm,
state my
I
name.
agree with other things you said, which is absolutely not true. So
So we're quickly approaching time. So I want to go around the horn for final thoughts on this topic, right? No Scrum Master, no Flow Master, no problem. Steven, what are your final thoughts?
I think they definitely help. And if you can have a good one in place, that's fantastic. And I think as teams mature, they have less of an impact.
Okay. Merman?
I would like to argue that if you're struggling with this topic of can we get by with a team having a scrum master full-time or no, or do we even need someone with the title scrum master? I would argue that if that's a hill that you're dying on as an org, there might be bigger things going on that you might be missing. And so maybe in your orgs, if you don't see a lot of scrum masters walking around, just maybe poke at the bear a little bit more, because I bet there's some other yeah, that's all I got to say.
Jonathan?
Ditto. I mean, to the fucking tape. Like, I can't say it any better
God bless
than
you.
Norm just said it.
God bless you. Can we audio clip that as well?
That'll be on the AU soundboard. Franz?
I think they can help if you have an effective one and they're put up in a position where they're actually focused on a small group of people or like a single team. But I think you can avoid needing one if you have a team that has high levels of communication. So if you can take a lot of what a scrum master does and have the team regularly doing it among themselves organically, you can avoid having a scrum master. So you don't need one. It makes it easier, but not every team can do it.
Okay. And
John, hold on. Before we get off Franz, John, can I ask you a serious question? How many scrum masters do you, maybe not official titles, but just people that were kind of being scrum masters, how many scrum masters do you think Franz has made weep
Cry?
or at least feel badly about themselves as a person afterwards? Just throw a ballpark number.
Does this include contractors?
Yes.
John
Oh,
knows
we're in the hundreds.
Hundreds.
I've
that's
definitely had scrum masters at some of the old places John and I have worked together. Go cry.
I can see the O'Reilly book now. The Scrum Masters and those others I've made cry by Franz.
Which we know will have a price floor of $39.95 because reasons. Mr. Cadell, take us home.
Just because you can doesn't mean you shouldn't. All right, sorry. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And but seriously,
We knew what you meant.
Yeah. Having somebody with the title without the empowerment to fill the role as it's intended is maybe worse than not having it at all. I
can agree to that.
keep that in mind.
All right. So once again, on behalf of Stephen, Chris, John, Franz, Mike, and myself, I want to thank all of you for tuning in, listening, and watching, because we're going to have the full video up on YouTube. We want to give a shout out to the Machine Man Records and the recording artist Krebs, who provides our outro music free of charge. Someday when we hit those 1 million subscribers, we'll monetize something. If you like what you heard, give us a like, a review, a rating on Spotify, on Stitcher, on PodHub, your podcasting platform of choice. We do have a Patreon out there. We are committed to being free. However, we just rolled out a quarterly program where we will be sending out swag once a quarter. So who knows? You may get a t-shirt. You might get socks. You might get someone's leading safe manual. Who knows? So on behalf of all of us, we want to thank all of you for listening. And until next time, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast signing out.
Our masters are people too.
No, they're not.